What's the difference between Tempera paint sticks, Caran Dash, Neocolor 2 Aquarelle water-soluble wax pastels, and water-soluble oil pastels? Mochi and I are going to walk you through the differences and demo different techniques of ways to use each one, and then you can decide which ones you want to try first. All of the links will be in the description down below, and of course, as always, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments as well. My name is Joanne. You can call me Joe or JoeGirl. I'm an artist and a creative play coach in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. I lead creative play workshops, classes, and retreats, both in person in my home studio and online, just like I'm doing here today. Let's get started. I'll walk you through each of these products and tell you a bit more about them, and then we'll start our little comparison demo. So what inspired this demonstration is this sketch that I did in my Patreon community. This week's prompt was to find a label in your pantry, somewhere in your kitchen or your home, and recreate it in whatever style and medium you wanted. So I've been itching to use these Tempera paint sticks. I've used them before, but it's been a long time, and they've kind of been teasing me from the drawer where they live. So I thought it was a fun opportunity to do something really bold and chunky and kind of messy, and just play with big strokes to create this bold graphic coffee can label. When I posted it on Instagram, people were really curious because they hadn't heard of Tempera paint sticks before, hence this comparison and introduction. So first we've got this box of 40 colors of Tempera paint sticks. They're big and chunky, but just quickly on the side here, you can see the variety of colors. Some of them are metallic, some of them are pastel, some of them are dark like jewel tones, and other ones are bright popsicle colors. So the cool thing about these is that they come in a plastic tube, and they work just like a lip balm or a lipstick or even a deodorant tube. So when you open them up, you just twist the base and the paint stick comes out the top. So they're nice and clean to work with. They're good for little hands because they're easy to grip, or if anybody has mobility issues or grip strength issues, these are really great. And they're clean. You can pack them away in a craft kit and travel with them, or take them to a park or wherever. So these are the pastel colors, including the white. These are all metallics, so they have a little bit of shimmer. These are the darker, more jewel tones, and then some bright popsicle colors here. For today's demonstration, I'm going to use this turquoise color and this magenta color. I'm also going to pull the white so you can see how white goes over top of these paint sticks later on. Next up, we have the Mungio oil pastels. These are water soluble. Most pastels that we used in kindergarten, and maybe the pastels that you're familiar with, are not water soluble. But because the Tempera paint sticks are water soluble, I wanted to stick with that being the consistent characteristic of the products that we're working with today. This is a little set of 12 colors. Again, I'll link it down below. Pretty standard set of pastels. Again, I'm going to pull the turquoise and the magenta and the white. So we're going to stick with all the same colors for all three products. And finally, excuse me, Mochi, thank you. We have the Caran Dash Neocolor 2 Aquarelle water-soluble wax pastels. These come in the Neocolor 1 variety as well, but they are not water soluble. I don't have those. I've never used them. I use these a lot. I use them in my acrylic mixed media painting, and I also use them kind of just to color things where I want a splotch of color, and I'll wet it with a water brush, like in a doodle journal or something just small. They're kind of clunky and chunky, like a crayon, a regular old Crayola crayon. So you're not doing fine detail work with these, but you'll see why I love them when we get to that part in the demo. And for comparison's sake, we're going to be doing our swatches on both watercolor paper and, sorry Mochi, not cat, watercolor paper and Bristol paper. So this is smooth and this is rough, and I'm wanting you to see the difference is because on the rough watercolor paper, some of these drier sticks, like the pastels and the wax pastels, they skip a little bit, right? They are drier, so they don't sink into the peaks and valleys of the watercolor paper, whereas on the Bristol, which is perfectly smooth, you won't see that as much. So I just wanted to give some variation in terms of the stock that we're using. Okay, first thing I want to do is, I might need to move the cat, but she's charming and lovely. The first thing I want to do is just label our papers so that we have clear spots to track our progress. So we have the Tempera water-soluble oil pastels and the water-soluble wax. Do they say wax pastels or wax crayons? Wax pastels. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is apply some swatches of each color. So let's do swatch of the turquoise here, swatch of the turquoise here. So creamy, so buttery. It truly is like coloring with lipstick. It sinks into the watercolor paper flawlessly. There is no skipping there whatsoever. It's not dry, it's creamy. It's like making marks with a stick of butter or lipstick, like I said. It's just pure deliciousness. Let's do the same with the pink. Also, you can't hear anything. There's no effort to this. I'm not dragging it. I'm not applying any excessive pressure. It's not difficult. It's not scratchy. It's really smooth, really smooth. We won't do anything with the white just yet. Then we were going to do the Mungio oil pastels. So here you can see the skipping. It's a little bit drier, so I have to apply a bit more pressure. A little bit more coverage on the Bristol paper, but you can still see it's not as buttery smooth as the Tempera sticks. The other thing worth noting is that, like most pastels, you end up with some little shavings almost, I guess, like little, like where it pills a little bit. Hoping you can see that, like little flakes of the pastel. And then finally the Caran wax pastels. These feel and behave just like a high-end crayon, coloring crayon. Like a really nice Crayola crayon. So lots of skipping, even on the Bristol. It's not full coverage, nowhere near the coverage of the Tempera sticks, and not even as nice coverage as the oil pastels. Lots of skipping, but they're smooth. There's no pilling or shaving or little bits. Nothing's coming up from that. Okay, let's just organize our little stash here. So the next thing that I want to show you is what happens, because these are all water soluble, what happens when we add water. So this is a water brush. There's water in the handle, and when you squeeze it, you just get a little bit of water out of the bristles. So it's really great for travel, really great for convenience. Just need to get a rag here. So I'm going to go across from left to right to show you what happens when we pull some pigment out of each color. So very sheer on the Tempera paint swatches. Now also keep in mind that the Tempera, and I haven't shared this with you yet, it dries very quickly. If you haven't applied too thick of an application, it dries super quickly and there's no smudging whatsoever. But you can still pull some pigment out. So kind of like a dried watercolor. But I'm not having to force this at all. It's just coming very smoothly out of the swatch and being diluted nicely with the water and creating a really pretty watercolor effect. The water-soluble oil pastels, they have lots of really nice pigment. It ends up being kind of creamy, almost like a gouache. And you're getting some of that granulation kind of, or like the pilling, the shavings are coming through into the diluted part as well. So you can see some little bits there. I don't love that, but maybe for whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter. And then finally, the Neocolor wax pastels are very pigmented. Look at that. A little bit of granulation. And by that, I just mean like some of the pigment looks like little bits, little seeds, or little, just little bits. What else? How else can I describe it? So let's do the same on the Bristol paper, just to show. So again, keeping in mind the Tempera swatches have dried that much longer. Still getting some nice pigment, but you can see that it's really lifting off the paper and leaving some white areas underneath. The water-soluble oil pastels, again, very creamy. Yeah, it's creamy and kind of sandy. Grainy, that's the word I've been looking for, grainy. But beautiful pigment. And then finally the Neocolor. So much pigment, so bright. And consistent, right? It's very consistent. And it's another reason I love these wax pastels, because it's so pigmented and so consistent. But there is a bit more granulation or graininess to that than there is the Tempera. But it depends what you're looking for, right? If you want something scratchier and a little bit more rustic, go for one of these products. If you want something smooth, buttery, full coverage, try the Tempera. So now let's look at what happens when we smudge them with our fingers. We know already that the Tempera dries perfectly and quickly. Like, I can't even feel that there's anything on my page. There's no texture, there's no waxiness, there's nothing. The oil pastels, because they're pastels, they are going to smear, and they're not going to dry because they're oil. They're going to stay oily, stay greasy, and you'll be able to smear it like this for days to come unless you use some sort of a fixative over top. The wax pastels behave a little bit more like the Tempera sticks. There's a little bit of pulling and smearing, but not much. Now, if my finger was wet, then yes, absolutely. But like, I'm really pressing hard to pull on the Bristol, and it's, it's not very dramatic. Really different behaviors for all three products, but you can also kind of do similar things with them, right? And then finally, what I wanted to show was what happens when we apply white over top of these. Oh, no, there's one more thing I want to show before we go to the white. When we layer things and when we try to blend. So I'm going to take the pink versions of these colors and go over the existing turquoise areas, because I wanted to show you how they blend. Again, the Tempera areas have already dried, so it's going to behave like a glaze. If you're familiar with glazing in watercolor, once a layer is dry, you can come back over it with another color, and it's like putting two pieces of tissue paper on top of one another. You can see the color below, but it hasn't been disturbed. You're not reconstituting it. So the same is true with these Tempera paint sticks. So that's the pink over the blue and the blue over the pink. The pink is not budging underneath. If we do the same thing with the oil pastels, when we put the blue over the pink, they kind of, like, the materials actually blend together, creating a different color. Do it the same with this. And it doesn't blend that well. You can see that there's kind of some streaking where the pink is pulling over top of the blue, but it's not truly blending with the blue. And finally the Caran dash Neocolor, behaving very similarly to a good old wax crayon, right? You're getting to see the layer underneath, but it's not necessarily blending. Again, like it's not mushing or smooshing the two colors together. You're still seeing those layers. And now I want to do one more demonstration with the water brush because I want to show you what happens if you try to constitute these blended areas with water. I'm just going to do this on the watercolor page because Bristol and water don't really mix. It pulls the paper and gets all pilly and rough. So we're just going to do it on the watercolor paper. So I'm just going to use the water brush to blend out the area where the two colors are dancing and mixing, just so you can see what we get there. Look at the difference. And that's because the red here was still more wet than the blue was, so that's the pigment we're picking up. The blue here was more wet than the red was, so that's the pigment we're picking up. In the oil pastels, very, very creamy lavender color, so pretty. You can see how grainy that is, though. It's not, I don't like it, it's not pleasant. And then this creamy, almost like a cornflower blue color. Oh, delicious. And finally, the Neocolor. Also a little bit creamy. Really nice consistency, a little bit more buttery than the oil pastels. And there's that gorgeous rich pigment again, and pretty similar. Doesn't, regardless of the order in which you laid the pastel, when you blend it, the colors are pretty similar. Very different here. Slight difference here. You can see the red predominant pigment here and the blue dominant pigment here. So very interesting. Okay, we need to let this dry now before coming back over it with the white. So I'm just going to need to be patient and let this dry. You might ask, why not use a heat gun? Well, we're not going to use a heat gun on this because I don't want to melt the wax or the oil in either of these products. I don't think it would have any ill effect on the tempera, but I don't want to melt these two products, so I'm just going to let the water evaporate naturally, and we'll come back and do our final demo with the white. Okay, we have a very dozy kitten here who's really wants to have her paw involved. Everything's dry now, and I just want to finally go over these marks with the white just to demonstrate opacity. So the tempera, thank you, Mochi. Yeah, I know, it's not really for cats. It really isn't for cats. The tempera paint sticks are quite translucent. They show up opaque here because the coverage is so good, but as you saw when I layered them, they are quite translucent. So let's just draw a line across with the white. So pretty thick and opaque, nice and dramatic. You can tell there's a white line there. Then we have the Mungyo oil pastel. Excuse me, Moch. This tip broke off the last time I used it, so hopefully I was able to melt it back together, but let's just see. Nope. Okay, I'll just use it with my hand. Waxy, oily, skips a lot, and bits. And you can see how it dragged through the existing swatches of color and lifted some of it, and there's some neat blending there. Okay, and then finally the Caran dash water-soluble wax pastel. It's a finer line just because it's a smaller tool, but a consistent line. It's not scratchy. There's not any little bits, but not as dramatic as these other marks. So depending what you're looking for and how you want to use these, there are lots of different options. There are pros and cons depending on, your interpretation of these results. Personally, I don't love pastels, the way they make little shavings and bits like that, and how they're always smudgy. I love the Tempera paint sticks because of how resilient they are once they're dry, which is super quick. And I love the Neocolor for the pigmentation, the brightness, and how versatile a product it is, because I can make it look like a pastel or I can water it down and use it like a watercolor paint. So yeah, thanks for hanging out with Mochi and I for this demonstration and comparison of these 3 really cool products. Once again, all the products are listed in the description down below. And if you have any questions or comments whatsoever, pop them down below as well, and I'll reply to them. And yeah, if you want to come out and hang out with me, you can join my Patreon community under the Sketchbook Sparks tier, or even come to camp for community and classes and just so much creative goodness. So ciao for now. I'll see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe.